The case I'm talking about today is how a nurse thought they could get away with multiple unalivings of small young children and babies. This case is shocking and heartbreaking because nurses are in a position of trust, so it's sickening what this nurse did in the early 1990s in Lincolnshire, England, and her name is Beverly Allett. Beverly Allett from the outside seemed a loving and caring nurse. She grew up in a seemingly normal and stable working class home, completely devoid of the severe trauma or abuse in many serial killer backgrounds. Instead, her childhood and teenage years were defined by an escalating psychological pattern of extreme attention seeking behavior and medical deception. She was born as Beverly Gale Allett on the 4th of October 1968 and grew up in the quiet rural village of Corby Glen near Grantham, Lincolnshire, England. She was the youngest of four children, having two older sisters and a brother. Her parents, Richard and Lillian Allett, were respected locals. Her father worked in an off licence and her mother was a school cleaner. From a young age, she showed an interest in caregiving roles, frequently volunteering for babysitting jobs around the village where she lives. People who knew her noticed she had a condition called Munchausen syndrome. As a young girl, Allitt developed a habit of wrapping herself in bandages and dressings and surgical casts. If anyone not sure what Munchausen syndrome is, it's a condition where you fabricate an illness about yourself, and that's not always true. I'll go over more of it later on in the video. She claimed she had horrific wounds or broken bones, but would aggressively refuse to let family members or doctors remove the dressings to examine the injuries. She intentionally fabricated physical illnesses to force hospital visits. This culminated in her successfully convincing surgeons to remove her perfectly healthy appendix. Once she received medical procedures, she deliberately picked at and contaminated her surgical scars to keep them from healing, successfully extending her hospital stays and attention she received from doctors and family. As she reached her adolescence, she became overweight and increasingly insecure. Her attention-seeking traits transformed from quiet manipulation into bouts of outward aggression and verbal hostility towards her peers. She failed the entrance exams for the local grammar school, instead attending Charles Reed Secondary Modern School. She left school at the age of 16 with low qualifications and enrolled in a nursing course at Grantham College. Her red flags started to appear as she got older, and while training to become a state-enrolled nurse, her psychological manipulation worsened. She was absent for a staggering 126 days of a 2-year course due to a never-ending cycle of self-induced and fake medical illnesses. She had some bizarre incidents, and fellow students and hospital workers noted she was highly unusual, often showing up to classes or practical shifts covered in unexplainable bruises. She turned up in bandages or claiming she had been mysteriously assaulted. Despite her horrific attendance record, obvious emotional instability, and borderline failing grades, the hospital was suffering from a massive nursing shortage, so management completely overlooked these red flags and fast-tracked her qualification. They hired her on a temporary contract for the fateful Ward 4 pediatric unit that she would go on to commit her crimes. The crime committed by Beverly Allett took place on Ward 4, which is the paediatric ward, at Grantham and Kesterville General Hospital, now known as Grantham and District Hospital. Everyone in the town was shocked because Grantham is a quiet market town in the East Midlands region of England, and no one could believe something like that would happen there at the, there. At the time of the 1991 attacks, the hospital served as a small, low-risk community healthcare facility, and at the time the hospital got a lot of criticism, which is understandable, but the hospital remains fully operational today under the United Lincolnshire Hospitals NHS Trust. Following the independent investigation into Allitt's murders, known as the Cloughier Inquiry, the hospital underwent major management, security, and structural overhauls. Ward 4 was permanently closed down as a children's ward to help families and staff move past the tragedy. Paediatric services were eventually relocated and reorganised across the regional trust. The 59-day timeline of Beverly Allitt's attacks on Ward 4 unfolded rapidly between February and April 1991. In February, the first attacks happened, and it was on 21st of February 1991 to Liam Taylor, a 7-week-old boy who was admitted with a chest infection. Allitt volunteered to manage his care. He suddenly stopped breathing and suffered severe brain damage and was put on life support. On the 23rd of February, Liam Taylor's life support is withdrawn. He becomes Allitt's first unaliving victim. 24th of February, Timothy Hardwick, an 11-year-old boy with cerebral palsy, is admitted following a brief epileptic fit. Shortly after Allitt is left alone with him, his heart stops. He becomes her second unaliving victim. March 1991, on the 3rd, Kaylee Desmond, 15-month-old, is admitted with a chest infection. While under Allitt's supervision, she suffers a cardiac arrest, and she is resuscitated successfully and transferred to another hospital, where doctors notice an unexplainable puncture wound under her armpit. On the 5th of March, Paul Crampton, a 5-month-old boy, is admitted for non-severe bronchial asthma. Before his scheduled discharge, he suffers 3 separate near-fatal drops in blood sugar over consecutive days while Allitt is on duty. On the 10th of March, Bradley Gibson, a 5-year-old boy, is admitted with pneumonia. He suffers a sudden unexplainable cardiac arrest while alone with Allitt. Doctors resuscitate him, but he collapses again later that night during her shift. On the 20th of March, Yanis Curran, 2-year-old, is admitted with a minor viral infection. He suffers a sudden cardiac arrest during Allitt's shift, but is successfully resuscitated. On the 23rd of March, Michael Davison, 11-year-old boy, is admitted after a minor fit. He suffers a sudden respiratory collapse while Allitt handles his care but survives. In April 1991, a couple of twins came to the hospital, and on the 1st of April, Becky Phillips, who's 2 months old, is admitted with gastroenteritis. Allitt administers a secret insulin overdose. Becky is discharged home but convulses violently during the night and dies in her cot. On the 3rd of April, Katie Phillips, 2-month-old, was Betty's twin sister, is admitted to Ward 4 for observation following her sister's death. Allitt attacks Katie twice over 2 days, causing respiratory collapses. Katie survives but is left with permanent brain damage, partial blindness, and quadriplegic cerebral palsy. On the 22nd of April, Claire Peck, a 15-month-old, is admitted following an asthma attack. Left alone with Allitt for a matter of minutes, she suffers a severe cardiac arrest. On 22nd of April, later that day, Claire Peck is pronounced to have passed away. May 1991, suspicion starts to grow because of the amount of deaths that were happening. Hospital consultants report the unprecedented statistical surge in child collapses to senior management. On 16th of May, the local police authority launches an official criminal investigation, and Ward 4 is immediately locked down and subsequently closed to paediatric admissions. The victims of Beverly Alltt include 4 children who lost their lives and 9 children who survived habitats, many of whom were left with permanent life-altering disabilities. Allitt's victims were administered with a massive insulin dose, which obviously caused a lot of the issues with a lot of the children. She put insulin in, which was high levels of insulin in the baby's bloodstream, which caused a lot of issues for why why a lot of these were happening to the babies. But the ones that survived obviously had permanent damage in the future of like brain damage and things like that. It absolutely breaks my heart hearing all this or reading about it. But yeah, it's not nice. It's as a father myself, it is awful to hear. And yeah, I don't obviously makes me upset to read about it, but it's a story that I have to tell. You know, we've had other cases recently, like Lucy Letby, which is another case, but this was definitely, obviously I was only 4 years old at the time, so I can't really remember it, but it's definitely not a, it's not something that should have ever happened to the children, to the babies. So yeah, it's not good. But Allitt did not use physical violence to attack the children. Instead, she used her position as a nurse to access and administer invisible medical weapons, like I said with the insulin, that left no immediate outward traces, making the crimes look like natural medical emergencies. Her 3 primary methods of killing and harming children were insulin doses. Allitt secretly injected high levels of medical insulin into the children's intravenous lines or directly into their bodies. This caused severe hypoglycemia, a sudden catastrophic crash in the child's blood sugar levels. The brain was starved of glucose, leading to violent convulsions, comas, permanent brain damage, and cardiac arrest. This was the method used to unalive 2-month-old Betty Phillips. She administered a lethal dose of potassium chloride into the children's bloodstream. While potassium is a standard medical supplement, an overdose immediately disrupts the electrical signals of the heart. It triggers an instantaneous erratic heart rhythm followed by sudden cardiac arrest because it mimics a natural heart attack. It was incredibly difficult for doctors to detect without deep toxicology screens. Allitt used plastic syringes to inject air bubbles directly into the children's intravenous catheters. The air bubble travels through the venous system directly to the heart or lungs, creating a physical blockage in the blood vessels, like an embolism. This cuts off oxygen to vital organs, causing immediate respiratory failure strokes, or fatal heart attacks. All of these circumstances were easily accessible on an open, unstaffed ward in 1991. Because the children were already administered for minor respiratory or gastric issues, Allitt counted on doctors, assuming the sudden collapses were just rapid complications of their existing illnesses. Beverly Allitt's motive was driven by severe psychological disorder known as Munchausen syndrome, like I've obviously mentioned before. She did not kill for financial gain or out of hatred, but out of a psychological, narcissistic need for attention, control, and power. Allitt did not want the children to die immediately. She wanted them to collapse so she could discover the emergency. This allowed her to join the medical resuscitation team, play the hero nurse, and receive praise and sympathy from grieving parents and colleagues. When the child survived, she would often attack them again to recreate the drama, and the unalivings occurred when she miscalculated the dosages of insulin or potassium and accidentally unaliving the children instead of just making them critically ill. Long before she targeted children, Allitt targeted herself. Since childhood, she suffered from standard Munchausen syndrome, frequently fatal illnesses and self-harming to get medical attention. As a teenager, she wore unnecessary bandages to convince surgeons to remove her healthy appendix and intentionally inject her own wounds to extend her hospital stays, like I mentioned earlier in the video. Criminologists noted that when she became a nurse, she seamlessly transitioned from harming herself for attention to harming vulnerable patients who could not speak out. Psychiatrists who examined Allitt classified her as an untreatable psychopath. She derived intense satisfaction from having absolute unsupervised power of life and death and helpless infants. She had a lack of empathy. She showed a complete absence of remorse or guilt during her crimes and throughout her 1993 trial. To this day, she has never confessed to the unalivings or offered an explanation to the victims' families. Hospital staff noticed an unprecedented statistical spike in child cardiac arrests on a low-risk ward. A routine lab test on a surviving infant revealed lethal, unnatural levels of insulin in his blood. When police were called, they started to check duty logs and found Allitt was the only staff member present for every single emergency. Daily nursing logbooks for the exact times of the collapses were found torn out and missing. Allitt was convicted in May 1993 of 4 counts of unalivings, 3 counts of attempted unalivings, and 6 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. She received 13 concurrent life sentences with a minimum 30-year tariff. Allitt is being detained indefinitely at Rampton Secure Psychiatric Hospital in Nottinghamshire. In 2021, she requested to move to a mainstream prison, but the request of a transfer was officially denied. So that is the case of Beverly Allett. That's the case of her. I hope I've told it well. But it's just sick what people do. But yeah, that's it really. Thank you for taking your time to watch this case. If there are any other cases you would like me to talk about, then drop a comment in the comment section. Take care and have a nice day.